So the first thing we need to know is we need to know what hook size we're going to be using. So the hook size we're going to be using is a US H8 5mm hook. As you can see, I use this one a lot because it's one of my favorites. I use it a lot. And it has a what we call an inline shaft. And then we're using Michaels has a thing called Loops and Threads. And Loops and Threads it's one of my faves. I do like it. It's not a real expensive yarn. I do use the more expensive yarns for a lot of projects, but for basic projects, you know, Loops and Threads is really good. It's a polyester yarn. It's 100% acrylic, and it is easy. It doesn't you know, ravel a lot or anything like that. And the color number on this is VS115. That's V as in Victor, S as in Sam, 115. And it's a nice, pretty blue that we're going to be using, more of a country blue to me. And that's what we choose to use today for our project. The first thing we have to do is we have to be able to put a loop on the actual shaft or the hook. And in order to do that, there's some steps that we need to do. And they're very basic. So place your hook down in front of you, because you don't need it in your hands right now. And you're going to turn your palm up towards you. And you're going to lay the piece of yarn over top of your 4 fingers. We're only going to be wrapping this around your index finger and your middle finger, like this. And then we're going to hold it with our thumb. We're going to wrap it around these 2 fingers and then create an X and then put it back inside with that thumb and ring finger. Turn it over. Now we're going to take our hook and we're going to take the mouth and we're making it down so that it's towards the fingers so that we can easily slide underneath the first loop, and then over top of the second. Make sure that the mouth is down, not up, down, underneath the first, over the second, pull through. And then all we're going to do is we're just going to grab that like that, okay? And then just let it go. So now what we've done is we've locked that yarn onto it, and we're just going to pull these two, the tail and the working yarn. We're going to pull them. You can see it's a big loop. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and slide that down by just pulling our working yarn, that's the long strand, until we get it tight around the shaft. Now remember, the shaft, which is the size of the hook, is the actual size of the stitch. This is an H8 or 5mm. That is what that is gauged on. It's not this area here. And a lot of times when we're starting to learn how to crochet, we have a tendency to make our stitches too tight. And what happens is, and I'll go through this as we go on, is that as it slides off of the hook for you to work with it, we have a tendency not to hold the yarn correctly, and it gets a little tighter around the mouth and this particular area of the crochet hook. So now that we've got our loop locked and the size of the hook, I want you to understand, if you slide this down and you look, see how there's a little tiny bit of a air space in there? Well, that airspace is going to be very important because it's going to allow you to be able to easily pull the hook through once you get yarn on it. So let's go through those steps. What we want to make sure is that we have the working yarn has tension and is easily fed to us. We want to make sure that we wrap it around our hand and our fingers correctly. It'll help you be able to control the tension of the yarn as you're working with it. If you don't do this, it's very hard to keep tension on the yarn correctly. So the first thing you want to do is you want to make sure that the yarn goes over top of your little pinky finger, and then underneath the next 2, and then over top of your index finger, and then just leave yourself a little bit of a strand, and you'll see some tension there. That's what you want. You want to make sure that you have a little bit of tension between your thumb and your index finger, because your thumb is going to be now holding that stitch on the shaft. So you're going to take your your middle finger and your thumb, and you want to hold that little knot that's right there. That's really important because this will keep you from making that tighter as you go off of here, and I'll show you what happens when you do that. We're going to take our ring finger and we're going to grab the back side of that little knot right there, and the thumb the right side. Now we're holding this in place so that as we slide down and make the stitch, that we're not going to get this too tight, because it's important that you maintain the size of the stitch every single time you do a stitch. So we're going to go over top of the yarn, we're going to rotate the hook, and then we're going to slide it down and bring it through that little air hole that's there. And if you notice, I'm sliding it down, but I'm not getting any tighter, and that air hole is there. And I bring it through, and that is our first chain. Important that we go back to the shaft. We make sure that that's the same size again. Now we're going to take and hold this stitch right there. We're going to yarn over, rotate and grab, and then slide it down and keep it right through that little air hole. Now, a lot of times what crocheters do is they don't hold this piece right here. And what happens is if you're not holding that and you go to yarn over, you're creating tension. You have a tendency, see how it's getting a little smaller? It's because you're not maintaining the stitch. And see how hard it is? And look how much it's a little bit smaller. Can you see how it's a little bit smaller? That means it's going to be too tight. So it's important that when you're creating a chain stitch, that you hold this stitch with both those fingers. That's really important. And then you're going to grab it, rotate it under, pull through that on the shaft, grab it again, same thing. And we're going to do 11 of these. There's 4 so far. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So we now have 11. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. That's how many went. That would be the first chain. Okay? So let's go ahead and practice that. We're back. Now what we're going to do is we're going to do our single crochet in a chain. We're going to start with a second chain from hook, which means there's the first chain. You can see that loop, and there's the second one. So what we're looking for is that little tiny, where the crisscross is, there's a little hole right there. So what we're going to do is we're going to insert our hook. Remembering now what we're going to do, because we're not going to be holding it up here because we got to see what we're doing. We are going to hold it below that, but our index finger is going to hold that yarn so that it doesn't get smaller or more tension. We're going to hold that in place. We're going to stick our the hook in there, yarn over, bring it back through the hook, bring up a loop, yarn over, and pull through 2. Let's do that again. Holding it with our index finger, we're going to insert the hook into the top loop, yarn over, bring it through the loop, bring it up, make sure the tension's correct, yarn over, bring through 2 loops. It's very important as we do this that you make sure that each time you bring it up that these 2 are the same tension. If they're not, then take them off and redo them. It's really important because you don't want your stitches to get tighter as you go along, because it will change the way the project looks in anything that you're doing. All right, put your index finger to hold it, insert it into that top loop space, yarn over, bring up a loop, yarn over, bring through 2 loops. Insert the hook, yarn over, bring up a loop, yarn over, bring through 2 loops. Making sure you're holding that each time with your index finger. I'll do that real slow one more time. Index finger on this. Next loop, there's the one you just did. Here's the next one. Insert the hook, wrap it around over the hook, bring it up, and through. It's really important. Tension is probably the most important thing in a crochet project. When you see things that people have done and you look at it and you go, oh, it's really cute, but there's just something that's not quite on with it. And that could be the fact that their tension is not as even as they'd like it to be. So learning tension, learning how important it is. Now I wanted to go back to that last stitch here. This is really important because a lot of times when you get to the end, you start to think, oh, do I have another stitch there? This was just the beginning base of the loop. And then that's the last stitch. And the way to double check that is just count how many you've already done. You had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So you should already have 9 before you do the last one. And then this is the 10th one. So again, we're going to make sure it's on the shaft so we know it's the right size. We're going to insert into that top loop, yarn over, bring it through, yarn over, bring it through 2. All right, and that's what we have. Then we have our first row chain. All right, so what we're going to do right now is we're going to take a break and we're going to do our first row single crochet in the chain. And then we'll be back. Okay, so we're back. And what we're going to do now is we're going to do the second row, and it's going to be turned around. So in order to do that, the first thing we have to do is we have to do a chain. So we're going to do chain 1. We're going to yarn over, pull through the chain, making sure that this is the same. Remember, this is really important, that tension. Make sure you have that little bit of hole there. You're going to yarn over, slide down, holding it close to the base, and bring it through. And now we have our chain 1. And then we're just going to turn and rotate the work that we have so that the working yarn stays behind. And now we have the back row of the project that we're going to be working with. And we're going to go, we got 10 stitches. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And if you look from the top, each stitch has got 2 loops that kind of create a little bit of a V there. And what we're going to do is we're going to crochet in the very first single crochet. So we're going to make sure, it's really important that we make sure that this particular stitch, and we're holding it with our index finger, that it's going to be able to stay the same. Because a lot of times what happens is the tension gets messed up when people don't hold that stitch and they go to actually put it in. And now if you look, this particular loop is really loose. And when you go to pull it up, look at the difference. You can see it's loose. So it's important that we make sure that that particular loop is really taut against that shaft. Again, leaving that little bit of a hole there, because as we slide over, there's always going to be a little bit of one. And then what we're going to do is we're going to hold it with our index finger. That's going to keep it from getting, as you're moving, it's going to keep it from getting loose. So we're going to then put the hook into that first space, and underneath both of those loops that are on the top of the stitch, we're going to yarn over, rotate around and grab it, and bring up a loop. And we want to make sure that we bring up the loop and don't go directly through the next one, because then that's a slip stitch and that's a whole different thing. So then we want to make sure that as we slide it down that both of these have the same tension. We're going to then yarn over and pull through 2 loops. Again, now we're going to hold that with our index finger. We're going to go through that hole underneath both of these loops. See it right there? Both of those loops. We're going to yarn over, rotate around, bring it up through, and then create our next stitch. So now what we've done, we've created another single crochet in a single crochet. So we're going to hold it with our index finger, insert it into the stitch under both loops, yarn over, rotate around, bring it through, bring up a loop. Make sure both of these are the same. So in order to do that, you got to get it back on the shaft again. So this new stitch has got to be the same as this one. Then you can yarn over, pull it through 2 loops. Hold the stitch, insert under both loops, yarn over, rotate around, make sure they're the same, yarn over, pull through. And if you continue to do each one of those steps, you will get even tension each time on every single one of your stitches. Hold it, insert into the stitch with both loops over on top, yarn over, and pull through 2 loops. And we're just going to continue across our row just like that. When we get to the last stitch, this is where people get a little confused sometimes, because they're not sure which is the stitch and which is the end of the row from maybe a chain 1 or something. In this particular one, it kind of like, well, there's that little bump, there's this little thing bump here. But if you look, as we did with the other stitches, there are 2 loops here that created a V. That particular part of it is the stitch. So all we have to do now is look for the hole. Well, the hole is right here. So we're going to hold this, go through there, and we're going to have to make sure that we get through both loops, not one. You don't want to do this. You want to make sure that you're going through this one and the other one. So it's a little bit harder, especially when you're coming off a chain. A single crochet is a little harder to find. It'll be easier as you get to the single crochets in a single crochet. Then we're going to yarn over like we did before, bring up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2. Okay, so now what I want you to do is go ahead and practice this.